Hey, what is up guys? Today I'm going to be talking about my completed panels for my custom BMO PC case. Yes, it's finally here. Things are finally starting to move along. Now this is actually my first real project working with steel and bending, so I ran into a couple of hiccups along the way. Starting off this video, I wanted to talk about some of the tips and tricks that I learned from kind of just working with the material. Tip number one, being a beginner in metalworking, I didn't really take into account the bend radius that I would need to for the sheet thickness, which resulted in a bunch of fitting issues that I had to address early on in my process. I wasn't able to incorporate this into my original design because I just didn't have the material experience that I have now. So I feel like if I tried to do this again, I would be a little better off in knowing kind of the processes that it would take me to actually bend a sheet of metal that's right up against itself. Tip number two. So I ran into a couple of rust issues after I tried to clean and wipe down my sheets with vinegar, which was not the best idea. I ended up rusting the entirety of one of my panels, and it went all over and just spread like wildfire. So to resolve this, next time I might either go with galvanized sheet steel rather than just regular sheet steel. That would make it more difficult for it to rust, and it'll make it a little bit more durable over time. What I found worked for me was that I put it in a bath of CLR. It's it's a pretty common household cleaner, and it just completely got off all the rust. This didn't exactly leave the same finish that it had before, so after I wiped it down, I just sanded it up with some 300 grit sandpaper. And after quickly wiping it off, it was ready to paint. Tip number three, when making bends back to back or nearby each other, it's kind of difficult to do so with a metal sheet brake. This is because when you clamp down the material, sometimes you'll run into issues associating with either the proximity of the bend to the previous bend, which actually means you might be clamping down onto the first bend radius, which makes it difficult to not accidentally shift your material because there isn't going to be a large surface area for the point of contact. So that's why it's really important to have a decent to good metal brake, which can apply a lot of pressure when you're actually mounting the material. Tip number four is for folding sheet metal flat up against itself. So this isn't something you're actually really able to do with a metal brake. So the route I ended up going is to use a 2x4 as a buffer, and using a ballistic hammer, I kind of just slowly shaped my way hammering into until the piece was flat. Now this was after I of course used the metal brake to get it slightly past 90 degrees, so it's like this. So I can use the 2x4 as leverage and just keep forming slowly but surely. Tip number five is talking about stress in the metal. I found that when you're working with metal, it's going to be often easy to forget that when you do clamp down your piece, sometimes you'll end up distorting it or leaving dents so just keep your work area clean. Be conscious of where you're clamping it and how you're clamping it. So make sure when you're clamping, you have a large surface area that spreads the force out evenly. So to continue on with this project, I actually had a slew of whole other sets of issues, like the paint scratching off my 3D prints while I was doing my test fits, or just the sharp edges cutting me when I forgot to put on my gloves. But I got it done and I went on to painting. So the next step, I found that this Rustoleum spray paint worked pretty well for me because there was little to no surface prep that I really had to do for the material. The only thing I did to some of my sheets was to kind of fill the scratches with Bondo, just so they wouldn't be visible in the top coat or the paint. So after filling it, I just gave it a quick sand and I wiped it down and put it into paint. Then to get my BMO onto his face and to add the kind of BMO name on the side of the panels, I used some tape and stencil, and I cut away at the stencil with the tape sitting on top, peeled it off, moved it to my panel, and then I just made a mask with a sheet of paper, taped around the edges, and there you have it. I used this blue painter's tape to mask out the panels, and I found that the more expensive painter's tape is a bit more effective when sealing the edges. So just keep that in mind when you are looking for your tape. Anyways, that's all there is for this video. If you guys found some sort of value from it, feel free to leave me a thumbs up, or if you guys have any thoughts on issues that you associate with metalworking, please leave them in the comments down below. I would also love to learn from you guys as well. And if you're interested in the development of this project, feel free to follow me on Instagram at Kyle_makes, or you can subscribe here right on my YouTube channel. Next week I'm going to be working on the last bit of hardware component to my build, and that's just about rounding out the last little bit of this project. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.